I've been told it was going to happen. I didn't believe anybody. I was 24 years old. I had worked my way through the process that clergy undergo when we are accepted to go to seminary. It's a very rigorous process. I'd been interviewed by the psychiatrist. That didn't go so well. And then took a battery of tests. The intelligence test was particularly dire. But managed to kind of trip over the line and get to this final interview with 12 leading churchmen and women, clergy and lay leaders of the Diocese of Central Florida. And so it was the big interview, and then they make a final recommendation to the bishop about what's to happen in my life. And I had been warned that this question was asked of every priestly candidate. And I hadn't really given it a lot of thought. And so the chairman of the committee, midway through the interview, says, Mr. Keith, have you ever been convicted? With all the maturity of 24 years, being a professional youth minister, I had quite a reserve to draw on. I stumbled my way through the only answer I could think of. Convicted? No. No, I've never been convicted. But, it sounded just like that in the room. Awkward silence. I walked out of the room thinking, oh dear God, I've just consigned myself to a life with a refrain, would you like fries with that? Like most youth ministers. And ironically, they approved me going to seminary. And the chairman of that group wrote on his notes to the bishop, his maturity will catch up to his promise one day. So we're still waiting for that, by the way. And off I went to seminary. Interesting question, isn't it? Has anybody ever asked you, have you ever been convicted? We'll be on YouTube in hours. Feel free to raise your hand. Have you ever been convicted? The readings today invite us to reflect fairly deeply on that question. Have you ever been convicted? Let's start with Jeremiah, the prophet of Pathos, the prophet that preached for perhaps over 40 or 50 years, and sadly no one listened to him. He preached in the final years of Jerusalem, just before it falls to the Babylonians, 597, 587 BC. He's preaching to turn the hearts of the people, and they're not paying attention. And things are literally, in Judah, falling apart around them. He sees a vision, and that vision is conveyed in the reading today. Now, Linda's such a nice reader. You may have missed the import of it because Linda reads so well. But may I assure you that what Jeremiah is seeing is the end of the world as he knows it. Heaven itself is dark. There is no light anywhere. It's a terrifying moment. He says the earth itself is scoured with a wind that's sent from God to start over again. It's literally the end of the world. And he says, and yet God will not make this the full and final end. Friends, it's easy to preach Jeremiah on an anniversary of 9/11. Let me just ask you simply, do you remember where you were that morning?
Right here.
Right? Right here? Everybody remember. I was at the Homestead Court Club, running on a treadmill. We're watching a replay of the first plane hit the first tower, and on live television on the Today Show, It's one of the few moments that Matt Lauer had nothing to say. It's one of the very few moments. That second plane hit that tower. And everybody, without speaking, at the Homestead Court Club stopped their machines. They got off, and we stood and gathered in a circle around that television set. I'll never forget it. A very well-respected member of our church summarized her feelings with the words, "Oh, blank." To which I said, "Amen." And we prayed. I think it's the only prayer, one of the few prayers productively that's been ever prayed at the Homestead Court Club. And it didn't matter where people were coming from in their background. We just stopped and prayed together. I literally moved from the Homestead Court Club in Edwards to the Vail Chapel. I called our administrator, and I said, "Open the front door of the Vail Chapel." She said, "Why?" I said, "We're going to have a service." She said, "Brooks, nobody knows." And I said, "They will." 3 hours later, over 700 people filled the Vail Chapel. We had them out to the street. The Zephyr radio station publicized a noon service that we had no idea what was going to happen. And there were truckers pulling off the interstate to attend that service. Was anybody there? Were you there? Yeah. Do you remember? I can tell you that within 45 minutes of that phone call, all 6 of the pastors with Rabbi at the Vail Chapel all came immediately there. And we designed on the spot a worship service. I should tell you that sitting about right here at the Vail Chapel was a man who was weeping uncontrollably. I had met him a few hours earlier. He was on a golf trip with some buddies. And he was on the phone with his son, who was an executive chef at the World Trade Center. And when the second plane hit, his son's phone cut off. He was inconsolable, and his friends took him right off the golf course, brought him right to the Vail Chapel. I knelt down in front of him, and I said, "I'm going to do what I've been taught to do, which is pray for the desires of our hearts." And we prayed, that golf group and I, that boy would be alive. A couple hours go by, they left. They come back, they sit in the same place, and the man again is weeping uncontrollably. My heart sank. I was vested for the service, and I thought, I've got to go out and say something to this man. I walked out, I knelt down, and he said, "I can't believe it, I can't believe it, I can't believe it." I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And he looked at me and he said, "Why? My boy is alive." I said, "What?" He said, "That kid," he was choking back tears, "that kid's never paid attention to a direction in his life, that rebellious," evidently on the loudspeaker system. Everyone was told to stay where they were and help would come to them. This boy ran down 20 flights of stairs, said to hell with that, and ran 11 blocks out and saved his life. And his mama had gotten a call right before our service was to start. I knew that I received all the gospel that I needed in that moment to navigate that day. I know how many people died. People in our valley died. But I knew this one boy that survived. I looked down at the man and I said, "Are you going to stay?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I haven't been to church in 20 years. I said, "It's a good time to start back." He said, "I'll never miss ever again." And we went through the rest of that day. All other kinds of very dramatic stories. May I ask again, have you ever been convicted? Paul, the great apostle, is writing in the final years of his life to the student that he loved the most. His name is Timothy. And Paul wrote letters with Timothy. Paul traveled with Timothy. He taught him, schooled him, mentored him. And now, finally, at the end of his life, he's writing a letter to Timothy about the things that for Paul are the most important things. And Paul says to Timothy, I was a man of violence. I did unspeakable things to the church when I was young. He had never forgotten where he come from. And Paul says to Timothy, this is a true saying. I want you to mark it. I want you to remember it. That Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners. And because he's Paul, he doesn't stop there. He says, of whom I am the foremost. And God displayed the utmost patience with me so that God's message of grace and love and redemption and forgiveness could be displayed to everybody. The gospel had gotten very personal for Paul. May I ask you, when did the gospel get personal for you? When did it get personal for me? Can I tell you that when my mom and dad divorced, I was just a few weeks into my college experience at Florida State University. You've heard the story. My mom left the house. And so when I came back for Thanksgiving, it was a radically different place. It was a very tough first semester for a young freshman. I did not speak to my mother for 2 years. She bought a new car I never got into. New apartment I never saw. I was really mad. One night my dad calls me. I transferred back to the University of South Florida in Tampa. My dad calls me, you know the story, some of you. He said, son, I miss you. Why don't you come over? I said, Dad, that's a great idea. I drive up to the house I grew up in. My dad's car is in the driveway. I key the house, open up, walk into the living room. Guess who's sitting in the living room? Your mother. My sneaky mother. Dad's gone. Mom said, close the door, sit down. She said, you've done this for 2 years, and it's time to stop. We are mother and son, and we need to be reconciled, and there's no force on this earth that can separate us. So I've removed all the breakables. You and your brothers take care of most of them anyway. If you need to break stuff, throw stuff, go ahead, yell, scream, taunt, we're fine. But we are not leaving until we are reconciled as mother and son. So 12 hours later, I left. I threw stuff. I broke stuff. I yelled so loud that the neighbors heard me. And we prayed together. I got it all out. And we were reconciled as mother and son. Can I ask you when the gospel became personal for you? My mom taught me about the forgiveness of God that night. And very personal and intimate. Paul says, Jesus Christ came to save sinners, but don't worry about that, he came to save me. My mom saved me that night because she loved me the way that Jesus had loved her. May I ask when you've been convicted? Have you ever? Can I say finally, Jesus in this annual visit that we have with the Good Shepherd, did you see the really neat picture that I found on the internet? This is so Anglican, right? Jesus is holding the little sheep. He's wearing white because that's what all men in the first century wore, white, with a beautiful kind of red and purple. Do you see that? Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, not so much. This Jesus doesn't look like he could lift 10 pounds. What a weakling. We've got better. I made a joke in Vail. People actually laughed, except the men that bought the sweater. Do you know the Bravo sweater, the pink sweater that drapes around the shoulder? and it ties right here. You know that sweater? Yeah. Most pictures in the Episcopal Church have Jesus as the Good Shepherd, and the lamb is draped around the shoulders, and its two little hooves come together, tied like that sweater, like you're wearing the Lamb de Bravo or something, you know? and that is not the Jesus whom we worship. I've told you before, who's the Good Shepherd? The Good Shepherd is the shepherd that stands between the sheep and all the things that threaten it. Jesus asked in the Gospel today, did you hear Steve read it? What person, when one dumb sheep wanders off from the other 99 of the flock, which one of you would not immediately follow that one dumb sheep and get him back and leave the 99? By the way, what's the answer to that question? What's the answer? Nobody. You wouldn't be in the Vail Valley if you made your business career like that. Can you imagine leaving 99% of your total estate completely unprotected? You'd be in Fargo. You wouldn't be here. Just to privilege the 1%? Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. What's the answer? Nobody would do that. Except Jesus says, actually, in God's kingdom, I'll do that. And I'm glad he did, because you know who the dumbest sheep of the flock is? It's the person who's speaking to you right now. See, the parable gets interesting if we are that one dumb sheep. I can do it better. I can find my own way. I don't need anybody else. I've got this. This is my life, and by God, I'm going to do it my way. I think there's a song about that. And Jesus says, oh goodness, we got to get you out. Remember the shepherd's crook with the nice curve? Remember that? Remember that gentle, they teach the children? Remember that Jesus can gently, or if you're a 24-year-old seminarian, you know, put that around your neck and pull you back, right? That's the top part. Everybody remember what's on the bottom part of the staff my mom used to teach? What is it? It's a sharpened point. Because the shepherd used the business end, is what my mom used to call it. He would stand in between the flock and the predator and say, if you want to get to them, you have to get to me. Bring it on. Jesus did that. Or else I wouldn't be standing before you today. Let me ask one more time. Have you ever been convicted? If the answer is no, wouldn't now be a good time? When I graduated seminary, and I was ordained a deacon, which we must do before we're ordained a priest, I was leaving the service where I received my diaconal sash, my stole, and I walked right into the priest that was the chair of the committee that approved my entrance into seminary. And I said, "Sir, I've been waiting 4.5 years to answer you." "Yes." He said, "What?" I said, "My answer is yes." He said, "Answer to what?" I said, "You asked me in my interview if I'd ever been convicted. Not of a crime. No. Have I been convicted in Christ?" "Yes." He said, "I guess now you're ready to be a deacon." Have you ever been convicted? And if not, why not today? In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.